Whilst it might not have been the track that everybody wanted to see, Eiger Nordwand has returned to Gran Turismo after over a decade away from the series. It's been almost a week since update 1.49 launched, and I've been putting hundreds upon hundreds of laps to Eiger, and well, I feel like now is finally the time to bring you my final thoughts on this returning Gran Turismo legend. So let's get started with one of the easiest things to talk about when it comes to Eiger Nordwand, the scenery. It's a good reason that a lot of people really took to this track. It was always one of those tracks that was visually appealing, visually stunning, set in a really nice location, and it did make it stand out from a lot of other tracks, both real world and Gran Turismo fantasy tracks. When it comes to Gran Turismo 7, this is pretty much the same track that you fell in love with over a decade ago. However, there is still a few key changes in terms of the environment that I will talk about a little later down the line. However, in terms of the original tracks, I feel like this may be the one that's probably been butchered the least from the likes of Trial Mountain, Deep Forest, and of course, Grand Valley. This is certainly a track where you can see major leaps in what it once was over a decade ago in GT6 to Gran Turismo 7. It is certainly a much more vibrant and bright track. It does feel like there's more detail in the side areas and all of the scenery. Overall, they've done a pretty great job without absolutely outright butchering the original. When I first took a look around this track, I did kind of think, well, you know what, it does seem a little bit barren, but it's definitely one of those tracks that the more you look into everything, the more you just may find. I do find that now I've spent more time with it, I've looked around all the areas, that they really have taken a lot of, care and attention to detail when it comes to hiding things absolutely everywhere on the map. Whether it's on top of the mountains, whether it's in the rolling hills, whether it's at the side of the tracks with all the animals, lakes and all that kind of stuff, there really is something hidden absolutely everywhere you look when it comes to Eiger Nordwand. So when it comes to the location, the scenery and all that kind of stuff, I feel like Polyphony have done a pretty fantastic job on this track, and it's not too far removed from what we saw a decade ago. So let's talk about the changes to the track in GT7. Straight away you're going to notice that the bump is reduced in size, especially in GT6 if I remember rightly. It did seem like the jump was just way overkill, and a lot of the time it was absolutely ridiculous some of the air you got, and I don't feel that would really work too well in terms of GT7. You can still get some pretty impressive air, but it's very much more car dependent now. The next big change is actually the wooden bridge, which is just now like a typical road going bridge. I do actually prefer this now. I was never a huge fan of the wooden bridge, just absolutely out of nowhere what it seemed, so that for me is a welcome change. Next up is going to be the tunnel. Now this used to be on this sweeping left-hander here, however it is completely gone. It does seem that in terms of the tunnel for this track, it's now taken over as more of a pit stop location, and there's definitely more emphasis on the tunnel now being a full-blown pit stop, which I actually really do like. I know to a lot of people that tunnel was iconic, but I do like the fact that it's now a big huge pit stop area and everybody's probably inhaling all those fumes. So overall, pretty close to the original track. One of the biggest changes when it comes to Eiger Nordwand and GT7 is the fact that a lot of the layouts are now completely absent. In fact, one of the main ones that is entirely absent is the dirt track layout. This does seem pretty strange considering the whole physics changes, and now the fact that the dirt and the snow physics etc are much improved. You would have thought maybe they'd have snuck the rally layout in too. But no, currently we only have a standard and reverse layout to the typical short track. Whilst it is still a very nice track overall, I do feel like losing that many different layouts really is a downside, and hopefully they do return in future updates. Initial events next. Of course this is going to be a shorter segment, very short in fact. In terms of the events, there's 3 of them, 2 of them are pretty decent and 1 of them is terrible. I think most of your time will probably be spent in either time trial, drift trial or custom race. In terms of the events themselves, the World Rally Challenge is good and so is the Sunday Cup. Let's move on. I think one of the most difficult things when it comes to Eiger is what to actually race here, what is suitable and really what is not. So I went through all of the different categories in Gran Turismo 7 to see what is suitable to race here. So let's start off with the Group 1s. Very obvious, these are just far too powerful, far too fast, and far too wide to really produce any decent racing. Most of the time you're probably just going to be sat in line waiting to cross the finish line. Next up is going to be the Group 2 machines. Now in terms of these cars, whilst they are a little bit less powerful than the Group 1s, they still feel very wide and far too big, once again, to produce any real close racing. In fact, this was where I got one of my funniest results when it came to the cars. This happened to one of the Audi RS5 DTM cars. Now of course the cars here are very big and very wide, and for me it was very reminiscent of Gran Turismo 2. Essentially the car whacked itself on the barrier, got itself lodged and stuck, and did the typical thing of back and forthing and just getting itself lodged straight back into position. In fact, this car got stuck here and brought out a yellow flag in this sector for around about a minute and a half before finally the AI just managed to bump it free. It was absolute carnage, so for me, Group 2 definitely a no-go. Very obvious, that one anyway. So when it comes to Group 3s, I feel like there's a massive step down between the Group 1, Group 2 and then on to the Group 3s. However, once again, these are fairly quite wide, quite big and bulky vehicles, and of course with less downforce, it makes them even more prone to accidents, bumping and just really not good racing. So yes, Group 3s just really aren't that good when it comes to Eiger Nordwand. Really, I would give these ones a miss round here. However, Group 4 is a step in the right direction. If you want door-to-door close racing, then Group 4 may just be the category for you. I found that these cars were absolutely fantastic at following each other, absolutely fantastic at going side to side together, and overall were just an absolute blast to have some very close, big, tight pack racing. Quite often when it comes to Group 4 racing, I do feel like the tracks that Polyphony kind of select for these in daily races are just far too big and far too open to produce any real close racing, and I feel like Eiger Nordwand is pretty much spot on for these cars. You've got a bunch of different drivetrains going at it, a bunch of different power outputs. It feels pretty fantastic. And in terms of the track length, I feel like it's pretty spot on for these Group 4 race cars. Moving on to the final category, Group B. Of course, this is highlighted by the brand new time trial in the sport mode, and of course the fact that one of the key single player events is the World Rally Challenge. And honestly, this might just be the creme de la creme when it comes to GT7 and Eiger Nordwand. I would quite happily say, in terms of one of my favourite sectors in Gran Turismo 7 entirely, that first sector in a Group B rally car with all four of those hairpins one after another is absolutely one of the best sectors in any GT7 track. Overall, the Group B rally cars really are a massive standout here. Finally, we have the road cars of GT7. There's a ton of these on offer, so it's a really wide variety. Also, in terms of, I guess, specific sectors and communities of the Gran Turismo 7 world, drifters will probably absolutely love this. It's one of the closest things we have when you set it to night to a downhill toge event. In terms of road cars though, they are absolutely fantastic. I find the sweet spot is really anything up to about 700 pp. If you go over that, really it's probably going to be too powerful and too sketchy around here, but 600 to 700 is definitely the maximum sweet spot. However, anything prior to that can go very well around here. Jumping around in time trial in something like this Alfa Romeo 4C really does make this track feel like a proper pure driver's track. So something like this Alfa Romeo 4C tackling all of the very tight hairpins, all of the elevation changes, the views, the scenery, the location, it really is something to behold. So I can't really talk about this being an immersive driver's track without touching on VR, and I'm pleased to report that it's absolutely fantastic. Now, one of the worst tracks in the game to a lot of people because they butchered it was Grand Valley Highway 1. However, that track came out alongside the PSVR 2 update, and I feel like that was one of the better tracks when it came to VR and really immersing yourself in the feeling of driving in VR. And honestly, I feel like Eiger Nordwand sits in that same category. Yes, it might not be the best racing track out there for absolute close racing all across the board. However, in terms of VR, it is just absolutely incredible. The immersion you feel whilst you're tackling those hairpins, going around with all the elevation changes or hitting that jump is absolutely stomach turning in the best possible sense. It's fantastic in VR. So my final thoughts on Eiger Nordwand. Overall, I think this is a much better track now it's in game than it was shown in the trailer. I think there's plenty to do for many different communities of the Gran Turismo 7 world. Drifters will probably absolutely love it. Road car racers and tuners, once again, probably absolutely love it. Racing closely in Group 4, Group B and road cars, fantastic. In terms of the key changes, or like the bridge, the jump size, the tunnel being removed and made a full pit stop, I honestly don't think they're really that far away from the original. In fact, I would say this track overall stays closest to the original concept and design than any of the other returning original tracks. So overall, is it the best racing track in Gran Turismo 7? Of course not. Is it a good original track still? Absolutely. Is it a visually stunning and great location? Once again, yes. However, the longevity of this track, honestly, I feel depends on what Polyphony does with this track now it's in game. So whilst this is a great starting point, those removed layouts really need to make a return over time, and I hope they do. So at present, this feels like a very good starting point for Eiger Nordwand, and it would be a massive shame for Polyphony to go to all the effort of putting this track and making it return once again just to completely abandon it straight after launch. I think currently that's my biggest fear, and I think the longevity will definitely depend on what Polyphony do. So no, currently it's not the perfect track, however, like I said, it does feel like a good start. In terms of the fanbase, I do feel like original Gran Turismo players will probably get more time and enjoyment out of this one than those that came along with sport mode. I know a lot of those guys are the ones that maybe want the GT3s or the most updated GT3s and, you know, real world tracks every time. So I do feel like that divide in the fan base is certainly something that might be divisive about this track. Anyway guys, that's going to be it from me today. Thank you so much for watching, and a big thank you to all of my channel members. If you do want to join, I do massively appreciate it between uploads. Anyway, have a fantastic rest of your day wherever you may be. Take care guys. Peace.